Fire Staff and Rapier this patch. I don't know. This is my favorite build to play in the game, and this is the patch to be playing this build. Seriously, I don't know if this build has ever been in a stronger state than it is right now. Don't get me wrong, Fire Staff and Rapier has always been a fantastic build for PvP, but this patch, man, Fire Staff just has so much damage. Utility from Rapier is so amazing, and the combination of being able to throw something like Shirking Heals on a build that does so much iframing like this, yeah, that's why I think this is probably the best that this build has ever felt, and I would say this is easily in the top tier of PvP builds, at least for solo gameplay right now. So without further ado, guys, I got a build video for you. Of course, there is a detailed guide at the end of the video going over all the gear and all that good stuff. The first half of the video is going to be gameplay, and there's a written guide on my website, pvpnewworld.com, if you guys want to check that out. And, well, let's dive right into that gameplay. As you can see, on the enemy outpost here, we got the 3v1, and I managed to poke him with the Fire Staff to finish him off with the Fireball, and I go up around the corner, heal up. This guy ends up chasing me. Decent damage off that pillar, and then I'm caught in kind of an awkward spot, and I throw the riposte up a little early. I love having evade ready for if you riposte and people are actually watching and they don't hit it, or you just kind of mistimed it. You can break out of the riposte and keep those iframes up without kind of giving yourself that vulnerable moment. And this guy comes around the corner, a nice riposte right away on his incoming attack. I go for the flesh on the Rapier. I end up missing that combo, and then right away into the Fire Staff and gap close away because my stam was drained there. And this guy keeps the pressure on. I just keep throwing down those Fire Staff AoEs. There's the heavy attack, 3k damage. Oh man, he ends up going down. And I just kind of sit here. I want to pull the archers a little bit closer to me. This type of a build has excellent mobility and excellent damage, but in a pure ranged fight, I definitely feel like we can struggle against a bow player. They have better accuracy than we do at a distance, and just better single target burst than we do. So yeah, I do like to try to pull people into a tighter spot, and here you can see it's hard to work these angles, just trying to LOS as much damage as I can. And I do get on top of the Ranger, and there's that awkward riposte. And these guys do a great job timing. They don't hit my riposte, and I end up going down, but that's not the end of that. I come back for a little bit more fun, and right away just open on the first player. I get a good combo there. I get the riposte on the incoming Sword and Shield player, I get the good counter stun on him, and just keep the pressure on with my Fire Staff. I ended up missing that Fireball. It's unfortunate. That connection could have been the kill, and I managed to get back on top of this guy with the flesh again, and then the Pillar of Fire. Unfortunately, I connect with the stone in front of me, and here I find myself in kind of a tight spot. I go for the burnout, break a little bit more distance, and then just keep feeding these guys some damage. I should really drink that potion soon so I can get my mana back up. But there's a huge riposte, and I get a massive combo off on that Greatsword player right away into the backstab, the flesh through to finish him off, and I go for the double roll because I don't want to eat that hammer stun, and I also pop my stone form right away. I'll be honest, I think with stone form, it's not a skill that you really want to just save all the time. You can be pretty generous with its usage just for the healing, or just to kind of like get yourself through a tough spot where you know you're going to take a lot of damage, or there's a lot of staggers coming in. And I find myself able to escape with the burnout, but these guys are right on my tail. The riposte just to buy me a little bit more time to get some stam back and some cooldowns, and I managed to get away with the evade, and I do actually end up surviving that fight. The friendlies show up and we take it home, but not as interesting as the rest of the gameplay I have for you guys. Here I start battling out with this archer. I've got another archer kind of behind me here, and the thing that you have to kind of keep in mind when you have two players shooting at you, one of them isn't shooting at the moment, but I do want to strafe as best I can and make sure I'm rolling as often as possible. I think if you use a lot of gap closers while people are shooting at you too, it makes you harder to hit, so you can pretty reliably dodge those attacks. And there was a good exchange there. I do connect a nice fireball on that guy, try to go for the pillar, and he's just out of range. But there's that burnout. I go at kind of a weird, try to pull an S angle on the burnout, and that's because bow players always have that stagger shot, and usually when you wind the burnout up, people will try to throw the stagger shot down, but I don't know if anybody threw it. I ended up dodging it if they did. This guy tries to run away, and he makes the cardinal mistake of running away in PvP. He runs in a straight line, so it's easy to land those few hits to finish him off. And then a little bit of time goes by, and I find myself just kind of in a fight at the side of the outpost here. A friendly and an enemy player ended up going down already. This guy gasses his stamina. I go for the burnout through him. quickly drink that potion to get some mana back, and yeah, didn't capitalize on that opportunity there, but that's okay. He's rolling around a lot. He switches to his bow, and I get a friendly healing circle on the ground. Love to see it. But another enemy player ends up coming in. I'm eating some ranged attacks from the side here as well, so it's definitely not a spot that I want to try to tank out. And there's a nice little pop on the evade to avoid the incoming greatsword damage. Unfortunately, I don't get the burnout quick enough, so I do eat the end of that greatsword combo. And here you see a lot of damage coming in from the ranged players. And there is that strafing. You want to change directions as often as possible. Even when I pop the evade, I'm not going to pop it in the direction that I'm already going. And I managed to make it to the burnout and break enough distance that I actually get to cover here. That was a very sticky situation. And yeah, this guy ends up coming around the corner. I start roasting him with the fire staff right into the backstab on the rapier. And unfortunately, he misses me with his combo, so I don't get that riposte. And he ends up getting just away with the bow. And there's the connection on the fireball. And this poor guy, man, he's got nothing left in the tank. There's the backstab to finish him off. And moving on to the next fight, a different OPR here. Again, just hanging out on the enemy side. Start engaging with these two players. It looks like we've got a healer and a spear player. The spear player, right away, he goes for those heavy stuns. Really easy to get the riposte off on those combos. And then I switch to the healer to try to get a bit of damage, but he does a good job defending himself, and I eat a nasty stun from the spear player there. Again, we go for that stone form to ensure that I don't get staggered or knocked down when I try to make that burnout, and I'm able to cleanly get out of there and heal up. And big damage on the fire staff. They both, or all three players just kind of camp the healing circle there. And yeah, I like this clip here because of the amount of damage I'm doing to these guys. Now they're getting healed, so they're going to play a little bit more aggressive than they would normally if they didn't have someone healing them. But oh my god, man, the pressure from this build is just amazing. And I'm able to connect some nice damage on the healer, even though he keeps trying to run back behind everybody else. And here I try to throw the fireball. It hits the player in front of me. You know I want to hit that healer. I roll to the side, go for the burnout, get a good connection on him. And unfortunately miss that pillar, and I get hit by this screen there, but there's a nice counter stun on the riposte, and again, this guy's saved by the healer just in time. I start throwing down the AoE on the fire staff, with the archer in the back putting too much damage on me, and I pop that stone form just to get that healing power, and these guys actually end up backing up a little bit. Only the archer stays, and this is something I can work with. He ends up jumping off the side, 4.4k crit on the fireball. He's going to try to go for the doorway. I just keep feeding the heavy and light attacks in there, and the dots are ticking away. He comes up the stairs, and beautiful, man. Fireball connects on the side of the wall, and the AoE splashes and gets him. That was a nice shot, and right away I jump on top of the enemy players that are fighting in the middle here. Throw a little bit of AoE pressure on the stack, and then I switch up to the top here, go for a very awkward flesh, and then get pulled by the guy's Scorpion Sting. So I'm just going to come back up to the top again. And I gas my stamina going into this burnout. I'm sure in my gameplay you guys have probably seen that I'll go for that gassing stamina roll to ensure that I can break enough distance to get the burnout off. On top of it, after I land in that position, my stam is still down, but I have the riposte and I have the evade. So yeah, still have options in that fight. Anyway, there's a little bit more footage at the end of the build breakdown, but let's get into that build. Starting off with the attribute points. Big focus on intelligence, of course, 150 constitution. I like running around 150 because you add that additional durability with the crit damage reduction. This is kind of up to the user. You could play this build very squishy or even more durable if you want. It's got lots of mobility and survivability with Rapier, so I think it can get away with even 50 con or less. But 25 strength. This is because I have a piece of gear that has strength on it. Normally, I wouldn't want this here. But on the plus side, we get some light attack damage, which is kind of nice for Rapier, making up for the fact that I have kind of weird attributes on some of my gear. The 50 dexterity you definitely want, though, for that additional critical chance, and of course the damage while at full health. And the Rapier scaling. Rapier can hit pretty hard even on an intel build like this, so having the first few points in dex definitely helps. And then the rest in intelligence. You want to have 350 plus. If I was fully maxed out, I'd have about 400-ish intel on a build like this, assuming I could move the strength points and had some better gear. But yeah, that is the attributes for the build for the most part. Now, taking a look at the masteries, starting off with the Rapier, I am playing my standard Rapier Grace kit. If you guys have seen Rapier builds from me in the past, I almost always play this build. I love it so much. We've got Riposte, we've got Evade, and we've got Flesh. super fantastic combo. Riposte just great all around defensively and can open up some huge offensive combos for you. Evade, the bread and butter of Rapier. Yeah, you can't play Rapier without Evade. I know some people like to, but I personally can't. And then we've got Flesh for the gap closer, and mix that with the Fire Staff gap closer. Yeah, lots of mobility on a build like this. Works really well. The important passive, of course, is getting that momentum passive, and I really like having the swiftness for the speed, as well as the cooldown reduction and additional stamina that you can get when you land hits. And then the last passive, of course, is On Guard for that damage. Then taking a look at the Fire Staff, I am running, again, my favorite Fire Staff kit. This is my favorite build, so you guys have probably seen this kit from me before. Not a lot of changes from the last patch. I think maybe no changes from the last patch. We've got Burnout, we've got Fireball, and we've got Pillar of Fire. Yeah, my favorite way to go. Lots of range pressure with this kit, lots of AoE up close as well if you want it, and of course Burnout for that big burst in AoE. You want to try to get Runes of Helios if you can, just more burst on the Fire Staff to have this final passive here. And then, of course, the Fire Staff passive perks that I've taken, for the most part, just focus on increasing outgoing damage, increase burn duration, and stuff like that. I did take the heavy attacks reduce Fire Staff cooldown on hit, as well as the free heavy attacks. And I really like this because mana is kind of on the tight side this patch, because they changed how you get mana back. You don't get it back from rolling, so yeah, I do like this change, at least so the heavies are free. I don't run Flare because I don't like the damage reduction on the heavies for bursting, but if you're planning to go a little bit more AoE focused, Flare is a fine option. And then these last two perks here for Fireball and Pillar, they're mostly just cooldown reductions, so and mana return. So I didn't bother with those guys, but there you go. Now, taking a look at the equipment, starting off with the Rapier, Rogue, Omnidirectional Evade, and Lifestealing. This is a big Lifestealing build, so Omni and Lifestealing are definitely BIS for this kind of a setup, at least for me personally. Rogue, I would prefer to actually have Penetrating Backstab if I could get it here, but Rogue is plenty fine if you don't have access to that. This patch, though, Penetrating Backstab is quite a bit better than Rogue, so that's why I mentioned that. Be like almost a 10% damage increase depending on the opponent's armor on those backstabs versus Rogue. And then, of course, the Augmented Electrified. I've got 40% of the damage converted into lightning. Now, because I'm not running additional fire damage, I have the Rapier as lightning damage, but if you're playing additional fire damage in your jewelry and you've got the rune glass gems with fire damage, or even the fire damage on your gear, you can switch this to fire damage. It'll probably be a little bit better, but since I don't, mostly due to gear limitations and item limitations, I stuck with the Electrified because people aren't building against lightning damage. And then, of course, that dot, super fantastic. I love it. And then when we take a look at the Fire Staff, again, I got a pretty good Fire Staff for this build. Lifestealing Empowered Fireball, definitely the way to go. And then Vicious, I would prefer to have Flame Attunement here, or if you're not running all fire damage, you could go with like Lightning Attunement or whatever, honestly. But having that attunement is going to be a little bit better, I think, damage-wise, for the most part, with almost all the moves you use. The only way that Vicious is a little better is if you get a lot of crits with something like a big Fireball, so, and you hit multiple targets with it. So yeah, that is pretty close to the ideal Fire Staff. Ignited Gambit for the 12% damage when stamina is not full, which is going to be a lot in PvP. And then, of course, that damage over time. A Fire Dot here, but if you're not running the additional fire damage, again, you could go for a different type of dot here. And then when we take a look at the gear, so I run 3 pieces of Shirking Heals on this build. Ideally, I would have 5 Shirking Heals on this kind of a setup to maximize that incoming healing power. But, of course, I'm on an Iron Man. I have some gear limitations on this guy, so let's take a look at what I got here. The first piece has Vigor. Arcane Harnessing, we don't need. Health, honestly, we don't need on this build as well. I know a lot of people are running Health, and they say Health is such a good perk, but I'm not, and I don't miss it. But hear me out. Vigor, why I'm running it. There are so many powerful dots in the game right now, and Vigor is going to help reduce that incoming damage over time. Ideally, I would have 4 Vigor on this build for the 60% damage reduction, and then the Desert Sunrise on top. If I had the highest tier one, would be a 77.5% damage over time reduction. This is huge because this can cut a massive amount of damage that you take in the course of a fight as it drags out. And I find for myself personally, that's where I see a lot of the attrition come in, is from that damage over time. So I really like Vigor. I haven't had a chance to play more than just the 1 Vigor piece and the Sunrise, but I did notice it right away. And that's not the only thing I'm running for dot or anti-dot this patch. And sorry to keep going on it, but if you think about when you're fighting an enemy Fire Staff player, Vigor can effectively have their burn damage or more. It halves their burn damage if they are heavily invested into burn damage over time, and it'll do even more if they aren't invested into it. So it can shut down quite a few really dot-heavy weapons and build combos that we see nowadays. And then, of course, I've got some refreshing to go with the Shirking Heals. You want 4 out of 4 refreshing this patch in PvP. Refreshing is such a good perk. The more skills you can use, the more you can attack, the more you can defend, especially with something like Rapier Fire Staff. And then when we look, I have a few pieces of Ellie and Physical Aversion, but ideally I would like to swap those out for Vigor in my perfect build. You do want Shirking Energy on the legs though, gotta have it. I don't have anything more than the 1 Freedom on this build, but I am running the Stone Form rune. You could run Freedom if you want, but if you're running Stone Form, I think you can get away without it. And then last but not least, we've got the Tumbler Feet Wraps. This is the way to go, man. These are so good on a build like this in PvP. I hear a lot of people like to run the Featherweight. If you want the additional durability, that works too, but I love iframing, man. I love dodging around, so the Tumbler Feet Wraps play so well into my playstyle. The Fortify, the Empower, and the fact that the Shirking Blessing has no cooldown. Incredibly good in PvP. And I put Shirking Heals on these guys, of course. For the gems, you can see I have 1 fire damage gem on here. Ideally, you would want them all to have fire damage if you are going for that additional fire damage on the Rapier especially. But you could also go for the stamina recovery here too. And then when we take a look at the jewelry, Shirking Dot Cleanse, Stamina Recovery, and I would like to have Thrust Protection here. This is my best in slot amulet this patch. I know I'm dropping health again, but I do think that damage reduction against Thrust is probably better than the health, at least in my opinion, and the Dot Cleanse and Stamina Recovery are must-haves in today's meta. And then for the ring, Hardy, Keen Awareness, and Leeching. This is perfect. You could have fire damage instead of Keen Awareness if you want. Instead of Leeching, you could go for Healing Breeze, but that's kind of a tricky ring to get your hands on. The Leeching ring, on the other hand, you can just craft using your materia. All of this jewelry I actually crafted with materia, so it's fairly easy to get your hands on if you've done your Seasons Pass, the free one. So yeah, definitely love the Leeching combo paired with the life stealing on both weapons. So we get a lot of life steal on this build. And then Healthy Toast, Refreshing Toast, and instead of Refreshing, I would like to go with Regenerating here, or even Nimble. And then when we look at the resists, we've got Thrust Resist and Fire Resist as the favorite two, but this patch I've gone with a flat 10% or 9.5% elemental resistance. Lots of different elemental damage sources this patch, so yeah, I do think this is the way to go. Slash and Crush are a lot less popular, but we'll see if people start using a lot of Inferno or something. We might see the crush damage become a little bit more popular. But anyway, those are the resists that I like to run, at least for this kind of a build. You're going to be threatened the most by enemy ranged players, so yeah. And that is the build. I've got about 2 more minutes of gameplay footage for you guys at the end here. I know it's kind of weird to have such a long outro clip, but I didn't have any really good short fights that I could use for the outro clip, so this is what I ended up picking. Anyway, this one's fun, guys. I would highly recommend you try this build. I know I upload and I post a lot of builds, and I'm always like, oh, this build is so fun, you gotta try it, but this is legitimately my favorite build to play in the game and has been for quite some time. And even with all those really cool builds that we see in the game right now, Firestaff Rapier is at the top of my list for fun. Of course, if you guys want to see a written guide to this build because the video wasn't enough or not your favorite type of media, there's a link down below to my website, pvpnewworld.com. It's got this build and so many more on there, so feel free to explore and check some of those out. And if you have an awesome clip that you guys want to see in the New World Top 5 fights, I would love to see it. You can send it to Kristofer at pvpnewworld.com. Best of luck to you guys, and I hope to get a new episode out as soon as possible. And of course, if you guys want to catch a live stream from me, there's a link to my Twitch down below for you too. A big thank you to my sponsor, ExpressVPN. They can help keep you safe on the internet, and you guys can get a deal on your first purchase with them, thanks to the link down below. And of course, a massive thank you to all of my patrons on Patreon for supporting the show. Without you guys, I wouldn't be able to do this, and yeah, I love doing this. I love making builds. I love sharing it with everybody. So thank you so much, everybody who has allowed me to just keep doing it. And I hope to be able to keep making content for you guys for as long as I can. Anyway, this last fight here, I guess we can just kind of chill and you guys can enjoy it. little bit different from maybe a regular video from me, but yeah, I don't know. In real life, I'm not as analytical. I like to tell more jokes and stuff. That's funny, right? Anyway, thank you guys for watching. Enjoy the rest of the fight, and I'll see you next time.